Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the Grand Boulevard Coalition Show. My name is Cynthia Alvarez, and I am your host for today. Today, we're going to get into a topic that I think is really important to talk about, just like I feel that all of the other topics that we talk about here are very important. But before I get into that topic, I just wanted to share some events and things going on with our program, with Grand Boulevard and Healthy Living. So the first flyer we have is our Youth Talk. It's happening this Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. You can scan that QR code and it'll take you to the link to sign up and get the Zoom link for that. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking about some good stuff on there this Saturday. The next event that we have coming up is going to be August 3rd, and it is a event, save the date. So it's a 20th annual Family Health and Fitness Fair. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Healthy Living, our number one goal, which is the program I'm a part of, will be there along with a whole bunch of other organizations. Sorry, a whole bunch of other organizations that are going to be giving out helpful information, resources, and free things for parents, families, places for kids to get their screenings, and free food, raffles, things like that. So it's very exciting stuff. It'll be held right by my job, actually, 35th and State. So that's very exciting. And yeah, we have that coming up not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So be on the lookout for that too. Very exciting stuff. But our topic for today will be on youth and depression. So that is a topic that I feel like we kind of talk a lot about mental health on here, the importance of talking about your feelings and mental health in general, and especially with youth, right? Because we want to normalize people talking to young adults and even children, starting from a very young age, about expressing themselves, how they're feeling that day, why they're feeling that way. And yeah, so I feel like that's something that is really important to talk about with adults, for people working in prevention, and even just parents and families and friends as well to talk about and to know. But yeah, so some statistics from the CDC, they say that ADHD, anxiety problems, behavior problems, and depression are one of the most commonly diagnosed mental health disorders in children. And between 2016 to 2019, there was an estimate of 2.7 million diagnoses of depression in children between the ages of 3 to 17. So it starts, like I said, from a very early age. From the age of 3, you can already start to see symptoms and signs of behavioral problems, aggression, symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, and even other things that we're not going to go too much into here. But yeah, so mental health definitely is something that needs to be discussed more. And that way, parents are better to able to identify it in their children, get an early diagnosis, which is really helpful to these kids to be able to get the resources as soon as they can, right? So the sooner they get the help, the better off they'll be once they're older. And that's really important. So that's why we want to share that information too. And also, between 2018 to 2019, reports showed that about 37% of youth ages 12 to 17 had persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. So 2018 to 2019, I'm sure they're going to update the data, especially during COVID. There is already a lot of data out there about that, which we'll kind of get a little bit into, not the data, but just important things to think about just in terms of us talking with our youth that we work with and how they've been feeling during COVID, how they felt after COVID, the effects of it in terms of mental health. And it's really important to know too that youth want to talk about their feelings, and it's important to remind them and encourage them to share their feelings, and for us to provide a safe space to do so. Right, so like I mentioned, me and our team, we work a lot with youth, and we're always trying to figure out ways to engage with them, learn about what are things that are interesting to them, right? What are ways that we can engage them, get them to talk about their feelings, get them to open up, Talking to a 3-year-old about their feelings is very different from talking to a 16, 17-year-old about their feelings, right? You don't want to minimize their feelings, and you also want to make sure that they know that we understand and that we hear them. So it's really important just to kind of create that safe space for them to be able to want to come to us, right? So hopefully it gets to that point that they eventually feel comfortable enough to come and say, hey, I've had a really bad day and I want to talk about it, right? Because they might not have that outlet in their homes or with their friends. But as long as we can create that safe space for them, then that's something that really matters. And the DSM-5 is a book basically that kind of gives a rundown of all the different mental diagnoses that people can get diagnosed with, behavioral, and things like that. So without getting too deep into the DSM-5, it's something that is for mental health professionals, people who diagnose people with disorders. And with that, they kind of go through the criteria for how you know when somebody can be diagnosed with a specific disorder. So in this case, major depression disorder is the DSM-5 name for depression when you get diagnosed with it. And so they kind of try to look for signs and symptoms within their clients, with the people they're talking to, before they can get a diagnosis. And they define depression as a serious mood disorder that can be diagnosed based on 5 or more symptoms that are present for at least 2 weeks. So they had a whole long list of different symptoms that are of note for criteria that can show, hey, this person might have major depression disorder, right? So a few of those symptoms I've kind of wrote down here. So to think about, right, that one of the first ones they mention is fatigue or loss of energy every day. So every day or nearly every day. So basically, they don't have the energy to do anything, maybe even things that include basic hygiene, brushing their teeth, eating, even things like that. Lack of hunger, not being hungry. That's also one of the other things they mentioned there. So having a loss in appetite and having either significant weight loss or weight gain due to them not eating or eating a lot. And another thing is also feelings of worthlessness or inappropriate guilt nearly every day. So feelings of worthlessness, low self-esteem, things like that, right? Those are things that you can kind of tell. Not with everybody, but sometimes teenagers might be more vocal about it, sharing feelings of worthlessness, feeling that they don't contribute anything to the world, or just kind of feeling things like that, saying things like that out loud. So that's one of the other signs. There was a whole list of a bunch of other things that you can find online too. But with that, I also want to say, do not self-diagnose. I'm going to bring that up later, but do not self-diagnose, because that can be potentially harmful to you, and it can be incorrect too, right? We're not very good at identifying things within ourselves. We need a professional to help us with that. So definitely encourage talking to someone if you feel like you might have symptoms related to this disorder. But yeah, so other symptoms to recognize in youth can include frequently being agitated or feelings of anger. Maybe a youth will lose their temper very easily over very little things throughout their day, things like that. And also loss of interest in activities, right? So maybe things that they used to enjoy, they no longer enjoy and engage in anymore. Their friends, they don't want to go out with their friends anymore, just because, not due to anything against their friends, but just because they don't have the energy to want to do that. And social isolation, kind of similar. So they don't want to engage with friends. They don't want to go outside, talk to people. Maybe not even just their friends, but talk to their family. They'll lock themselves inside their room for long periods of the day and avoid talking to anybody, and things like that. Also, like I mentioned, low self-esteem, being self-critical about yourself, being self-critical about one's appearance or even their intelligence, things like that. And another thing is also difference in sleep patterns. So maybe you notice that your friend or your family member is not being able to sleep very well. They get maybe 2 hours of sleep in a day, things like that. Or also, on the other side, it can be that they get a lot of sleep, right? And they still don't have the energy to go through their day. So they can get the 8 to 9 hours of sleep, but they still feel that tired feeling and just a lack of energy. And some people will sleep throughout the day, things like that. And one of the other more serious things is also thoughts of self-harm or self-harming or suicidal thoughts is another symptom. So people talking about wanting to hurt themselves, wanting to hurt others, and then hurt themselves, expressing emotions or feelings or thoughts like that. That can also be symptoms or signs of depression in somebody. So those are kind of a lot of things, right, to think about. There are a lot of other factors and a lot of other symptoms that we didn't talk about. So it's really important to just feel that you know all the facts with that and how people can get diagnosed with it. And so what can cause or contribute to depression, right? And it's kind of a multitude of things. It's not just, one thing and then you have depression, right? But sometimes it can be something, for example, like a traumatic event, right? It could be one event. It could be a bunch of events happening one after another continuously. So it can be something, for example, childhood trauma. That's something that could have been something they experienced in their childhood, something that they experienced continuously in their childhood, abuse, neglect, things like that. Another thing is also something that's very common in this country, which is mass shootings that are very traumatic. Knowing people that have been through a mass shooting, a loved one. It doesn't even have to be something that directly happened to you, but something that happens to someone that you care about or that happened in your community, which can cause trauma and things like that. So another thing too is also bullying. Bullying is also something that can impact a person psychologically within their mind and within impacting their self-esteem, things like that. They're scared to go to work or school because they're worried about getting bullied. And so that creates kind of that feeling of constantly feeling unsafe, and that can impact their mindset too. Other things can also be losing a loved one. Like I said, it could be due to a traumatic event or even things like cancer and other things too, other illnesses that they might lose a loved one to. So it's very important just to think about all of that. And just to backtrack a little bit, youth really like talking about their feelings, right? And sometimes it's a little harder for some than for others to talk about it just because they've gone through something really traumatic, right? And they don't want to outright tell you, oh, this happened in my childhood. And they're not going to open up to us that quickly, right? So it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to really learn about this child, this teenager, whoever they are, and just get to know them and then kind of working through that, right? So getting to know them, asking questions that are very open-ended and versus kind of asking like very short-ended answers, right? That kids will not be able to elaborate to. And it really, like I said, it takes a lot of patience. Sometimes at first they will give you one-worded answers. They don't want to elaborate on certain things. But as long as you're consistent with them and they're consistent with you, over time, that kind of bond and connection builds up where they're able to feel more comfortable talking to you. Whether you're their parent, their friend, or a community youth worker, it really does take time to get to know people and to just learn about their traumas, right? And what's really going on. So kind of thinking about all of that. Another thing related to traumatic events, something called ACEs, which is called Adverse Childhood Experiences. I might have talked about this a while ago, But not to get too into it right now. But basically, what ACEs is things that happened in your past when you were a child. Um, and it could have been even something as simple or not simple as your parents going through a divorce, right? That is something that is a traumatic experience. The legal battles that your parents have to go through that you're also watching and observing. Even observing your parent get abused by the other parent, even getting abused by a sibling, like watching things like that in your household are things that can impact you as well. You don't have to necessarily be the person being attacked to be traumatized. So it's something that's very important to think about with ACEs. If you've gone through traumatic events or things like that, you're more likely to experience mental health and even physical health issues into adulthood. So that can impact things like becoming depressed, becoming anxious, other things like physical illnesses, heart issues, breathing issues. Overall, physical health can be severely impacted, high blood pressure, things like that too. So that's really important to think about. So yeah, it's something that ACEs is really, really interesting. I might do another refresher show on it just because I really like talking about it. But yeah, so that's one of the other things. And so going kind of into observing symptoms in kids, right? Once you're noticing these symptoms, and it doesn't also have to be just for our focus for today, right? It's youth, but a lot of adults experience these symptoms. And so sometimes even teenagers pick up on this, right? They're very observant and they can see that adults in their lives that they care about could be experiencing these symptoms. But just for the focus of today's show, we're talking about youth specifically. So once you're able to kind of recognize some of these symptoms in our youth, it's very important to think about what are potential treatment options, right? So treatment options could be therapy, talking to somebody, a counselor at your school, and medication. So that really depends on the severity of the depression, right? So first things first, like I mentioned, get a diagnosis from a professional. So you cannot self-diagnose yourself, even if you are super 100% sure, like, hey, I have 5 or more of these symptoms. I think I have major depression disorder. That's not enough for you to get treatment in terms of medication, like antidepressants and things like that. It's something that you need to get a diagnosis from a psychologist, a psychiatrist. And so it's important that you look up resources in your area that include that, and where you can get that in terms of things that fall with your insurance and things like that. So making sure that you get a diagnosis, and then once you're there, you seek next steps. And like I said, therapy is one thing that people can get, and you don't necessarily even have to have depression to get therapy. I feel like everybody needs therapy sometimes at some points in their lives. We all go through hardships and things that can stress us out. So it's really important to talk to somebody about these things. And I feel like with youth, it's really important, especially to learn about their feelings and learn how to cope with those feelings, right? Those feelings of depression just don't go away after talking about them to a therapist, but your therapist will be able to help you come up with coping techniques, come up with healthy ways to deal with your emotions. And there are specific therapies that help you kind of uplift yourself, uplift your way of thinking about yourself, can increase that self-esteem, to have better self-esteem, and kind of stray away from those negative thoughts that people kind of get about themselves. And yeah, so that's kind of very important, and very helpful things that therapists can do for our teenagers as well. Other things besides treatment, like medication and therapy, things that we can do at home that are low cost or free for those who can't afford therapy, is self-care, right? Self-care is something that's very important that we can literally do from the comfort of our homes. And that can be something even as simple as checking in on friends and family, just having group calls, playing video games with your friends and being on a call with them, having a good time. That's something that's self-care. Um, and other things like engaging in activities that you enjoy besides gaming. Maybe you like art, you like music, you like playing music, you like going to concerts, or you like crafting things. So you can get things, even from the Dollar Tree that are very accessible to people, or even just drawing with things that you have at home. And things like that, even videos that can give you tutorials on how to do certain things. Other things like that youth really enjoy doing, such as skating, swimming, and even riding your bike, even going on walks out in nature and just kind of being outside, getting the sun in your face just feels really good, is something that is very helpful just to kind of boost morale. And kind of aligning with that, right? Other exercises you can do from home workouts, and yeah, even joining clubs as well. That's a way to kind of help people socialize, and you're also to able to engage in things that you enjoy, right? So engaging in there's art clubs at your school, there's after school matters, a whole bunch of other programs that engage in kids' interests, which I feel like is really important that they take advantage of before they graduate. And so you're able to kind of build lifelong friends through these kinds of programs, and it's really, really great. So I feel like those are things to keep in mind when thinking about what can I do for self-care for myself, right? And so what can you do if you think a loved one is going through depression and maybe expressing some of these symptoms that you've noticed, right? So the first thing you can really do is just kind of sit and talk with them, engage in a conversation, and not just, straight up accuse somebody like, oh, I think you're depressed, or I think you have this, but just saying like, oh, I've noticed, you've had a lack of energy recently. Is there something that's going on that you want to talk about? I'm here for you. And kind of starting the conversation like that. And even talk about next steps if they're open to it. Like, do you want to talk to a therapist or maybe the school counselor? Even suggesting self-care things they can do, and even plan things with them. Plan things with them that they like to do, like, oh, let's go out, let's go watch a movie, let's go out to eat, or let's go walk in the park, right? So doing things that they like to do is really important, just to kind of get them out of that space that they're in. And also making sure that they're not going through, or they're not currently a threat to themselves or other people. That's something that's really important to think about. If you feel like they are, then there is actually a hotline, crisis line, 988, which you can call, and they're able to actually help you go, if you're going through a crisis currently, having thoughts, suicidal thoughts, you can call them. There's people that are open to talking to you. They want to help you and support you however they can. So even if you feel like you have nobody to talk to, it's really important to realize that even if there's no one nearby you, if you're by yourself, you can call this number or even text them if you don't feel comfortable calling on the phone. And they do offer Spanish calls as well. So there's people that will speak in your language to help you. They're currently, I believe, English and Spanish and probably a few more languages that they help in. So it's just really important to be aware of these things that you feel like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get help. They can offer resources. They can send you to places that are near your home where you can go get help and make sure that you're avoiding, self-harm or suicide or anything like that. So just making sure that people are aware of this, share this with people that you know and love so that they can also share this. And yeah, I really hope that you all kind of learned something from this today. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and I will see you all next week. Have a good day. Thank you.